been thinking about this problem for a few years. It involves AI and how it just keeps getting better. I think a number of people got a wake-up call a few years ago when ChatGPT was released, and the stuff we're doing with image generation and video generation is pretty crazy. Quite a few companies are working on systems to replace workers, and if companies can get the same labor for less cost, why wouldn't they use that? AI can do a lot of things, but it's not quite there on some tasks. For example, I had an image generator create some of the text images earlier. It gave me 4 images, and most of them had spelling errors, and I ended up doing some Photoshop to grab the parts that I wanted. So it still took some oversight and some Photoshop skills. Admittedly, this is a lot better than where things were at a few years ago, when AI couldn't do images and text together. It can create a pretty solid first draft though, and it's getting better very quickly. For example, here's a generated video from 2023 and again in 2025. If AI keeps progressing like this, what's the future of jobs? Here's what the AI companies are saying.
This is going to eliminate a lot of current jobs.
Some creative jobs maybe will go away, but maybe they shouldn't have been there in the first place.
You have this long-term concern that maybe you don't need developers at all at some point.
It's kind of deeply unfair that, a group of people can build AI and just take everyone's jobs away. And in some sense, there's nothing you can do to stop them right now.
I've tried to do a few different back of the envelopes about how much this could be. I think this is something on the order of 70 to 80% of existing human jobs.
In a benign scenario, probably none of us will have a job. And in the negative scenario, we'll bets are off. We're in deep trouble.
Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei has warned that AI could eliminate half of entry-level white-collar jobs within the next 5 years. He also predicts this could lead to an unemployment rate as high as 20%.
And companies are eager to replace workers with AI. Regarding the timeline from AI companies, I understand that there's financial incentives for them to be overconfident. But even if they're off by 10 years, it still raises the question, what does it mean for the future of work and the ability of people to earn a living? I recently went back and watched the video, Humans Need Not Apply. It was made all the way back in 2014 and was very popular, getting over 17 million views. It's almost 11 years old now. The video talks about AI taking people's jobs. He uses the analogy that horses at the end of the 1800s were everywhere. But then cars came along and we didn't need horses anymore. Horse labor had been replaced with automobiles. What if humans are like those horses? We have an economic role because we can do complicated intellectual tasks. But what if human intellect is superseded by machine intelligence? Will humans become as useless as horses in the 21st century? I think the ideas raised in the video are still generally correct, but there are some problems with it. The most obvious problem is that the replacement of people's jobs by AI was expected to happen much sooner, but that never actually materialized. Self-driving cars are still struggling with 100% self-driving. Elon has been overpromising self-driving cars for years. There's been big improvements in the past 10 years, but we still aren't at 100%. And self-driving cars have had no impact on taxis, transportation, or jobs.
Self-driving cars aren't the future. They're here and they work. Self-driving cars have traveled hundreds of thousands of miles up and down the California coast and through cities, all without human intervention. The question is not if they'll replace cars, but how quickly. They don't need to be perfect, they just need to be better than us. It's easy to see them being better than humans because they already are. The transportation industry in the United States employs about 3 million people. Extrapolating worldwide, that's something like 70 million jobs at a minimum. These jobs are over. The autos are coming, and they're the first place where most people will really see the robots changing society. But there are many other places in the economy where the same thing is happening, just less visibly.
Now, I'm not using these video clips to dunk on the video creator. I understand that predicting the future is difficult, and I respect the stuff that he's done. But self-driving cars haven't taken over the roads, and transportation jobs haven't disappeared in the past 11 years. I'm using these clips to make one point, which is, sometimes things don't come together as quickly as you expect them to. I'll even admit that 10 years ago, I thought self-driving trucks were arriving soon, and truckers would be out of a job. Getting self-driving cars working correctly requires getting them to handle all kinds of different edge cases, like traffic laws in different countries, all different weather conditions, glare from the sun, road closure, and confusing traffic patterns. To say this in more general terms, getting computers to interact with the real world is difficult because sometimes things look confusing, and sometimes people can handle that ambiguity better than AI. By the way, on the day that I'm recording this, Tesla is supposed to roll out their full self-driving robotaxis in Austin, but they're going to have a Tesla employee in the passenger seat, just in case anything goes wrong and they need to take over. And the cars won't drive under certain conditions, like when it's raining, and will avoid confusing intersections. This is a clip from earlier today of someone riding in the Tesla robotaxi. It drives fine for most of the 20-minute ride, but in this clip it erroneously gets in the left turn lane, drives through the intersection, and then can't figure out what lane it's supposed to be in. He makes a similar argument about a humanoid robot called Baxter, giving us the feeling that the replacement of jobs is imminent.
But they're the old kind of automation. This is the new kind. Meet Baxter. Unlike these things, which require skilled operators and technicians and millions of dollars, Baxter has vision and can learn what you want him to do by watching you do it. And he costs less than the average annual salary of a human worker. Unlike his older brothers, he isn't pre-programmed for one specific job. He can do whatever work is within the reach of his arms. Baxter is what might be thought of as a general-purpose robot, and general purpose is a big deal. Baxter today is the computer of the 1980s. He's not the apex, but the beginning. Even if Baxter is slow, his hourly cost is pennies worth of electricity, while his meat-based competition costs minimum wage. And while Baxter isn't as smart as some of the other things we will talk about, he's smart enough to take over many low-skilled jobs.
So that was 10 years ago. Whatever happened to the Baxter robot? The robot was discontinued in 2018 due to disappointing sales. I also want to caution that none of this means that it's never going to happen. I think it definitely will. It's just that the pace of change has been slower than we had expected. A slower pace of change is better for people because it prevents a big spike in unemployment. If 1 to 2% of people lose their job each year for 20 years, that's a lot easier for an economy to handle than if 20 to 40% of people lose their jobs in a single year. For example, 200 years ago, a lot of people worked in farming. We mechanized farming and lots of workers shifted to other jobs. And while it led to job loss, it happened slowly enough that it wasn't causing mass unemployment and poverty. So we never had a big spike in unemployment. If the past is any indication, change might not happen as quickly as people expect due to rare, complicated issues that aren't easily solvable. It's hard to create a self-driving car that can work correctly 99% of the time, but even after you do that, what if it messes up the other 1%? And that 1% problem is even more difficult to solve. On the positive side for humanity, it would slow the rate of job losses. People have always created better tools. This increased productivity meant that they no longer needed as many workers. This led to job loss and some temporary hardship, maybe some unemployment and maybe a lower paying job. On the positive side, the products became cheaper and workers generally find other work. Current AI is probably best described as smart tools. They can do some complicated things, but they still need a person to operate them. For example, an AI can spot a tumor on an X-ray, a different AI can generate an image or a video, and another AI can drive a car. Each one has one narrow set of skills. They aren't autonomous workers, but like every other technology, it'll still lead to job loss. But that's just phase 1 of AI. Phase 2 is artificial general intelligence, or AGI. AGI is when an AI has a bunch of different skills and is reasonably competent. It's basically the wholesale replacement of a human worker. AI companies are working towards artificial general intelligence.
For me, AGI is basically the equivalent of a median human that you could hire as a coworker. And then they could like say, do anything that you'd be happy with a remote coworker doing, like just behind a computer, which includes like, learning how to go be a doctor, learning how to go be a very competent coder. Like there's a lot of stuff that a median human is capable of getting good at. And I think one of the skills of an AGI is not any particular milestone, but the meta skill of learning to figure things out, and that it can go decide to get good at whatever you need.
Now obviously, AGI would dramatically reduce the need for workers. Will that happen anytime soon? I don't know. Maybe we'll stall out at smart tools for a while. But a number of AI researchers are saying that AGI could happen in the next few years.
In a recent interview with Bloomberg, Altman said he thinks AGI will probably get developed during Trump's term. Elon Musk and Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic, have both said they think AI systems could outsmart humans by 2026. In the largest survey of AI researchers to date, which included over 2,700 participants, researchers collectively estimated there is a 10% chance that AI systems can outperform humans on most tasks by 2027.
It's worth mentioning that there's also a phase 3 of AI. It's artificial superintelligence, basically an AI which is smarter than the smartest people. I'm not going to talk about it in this video because it's impossible to predict what would happen. ASI is basically like having super advanced aliens arrive on Earth, and we can't predict what they would do.
If you're not engaging AI actively and aggressively, you're doing it wrong. You're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to somebody who uses AI.
Here's the thing. He's right about that. In the short term, workers who don't use AI will lose out to workers who use smart tools. In a lot of ways, this is a hopeful message because it means there's something you can do. But that's not true of every job. If robo-taxis worked really well and they were cheaper than taxi drivers won't be able to keep their jobs. Same with truckers. And more importantly, he's talking about the transition from the modern world to phase 1 of AI with smart tools. If AGI happens, holding on to your job is going to get a whole lot harder and will probably involve transitioning into being a supervisor. Also, some work is easier for an AI to handle than others. White-collar workers are in danger of being replaced. Taxicab drivers and Uber drivers might disappear in the next 10 years. But I don't foresee plumbers, delivery drivers, or dentists being replaced by AI in the next 10 years. AI's natural habitat is the digital world, so it can more easily handle stuff in the digital world, which involves moving around bits and bytes. People's native habitat is the 3D world, so people have a natural advantage in that space. We live in a world of inequality, and AI is likely to make that worse. The most obvious winners here will be tech companies and rich investors. History has shown that making a worker twice as productive doesn't lead to double the income. If that were true, this graph would look very different, and the share of income by the very wealthy would be relatively stable over time. Let's say a company fires half their workers, and the other half use smart tools to become twice as productive. The remaining workers won't get double the pay. Instead, much of the wealth will accumulate to the C-suite and investors. An increasing income inequality will also happen if AI causes significant unemployment, both because unemployed workers aren't earning income, but also because workers have less negotiating power in the job market when unemployment is high. According to the AI company Anthropic, the next decade is going to be a difficult one for white-collar workers. But it's not just white-collar workers, since jobs like taxicab drivers and truckers will also be under threat. The short answer is no, it can't be stopped. Once knowledge is out there about how to build AI, it can't be withdrawn. And AI companies have no feasible way to coordinate with other companies to pause development. It's like a horse race, and nobody wants to slow down and risk losing the prize. If one company paused AI development, they'd just lose out to companies who didn't. And if every American AI company paused development, they'd lose out to Chinese companies. So it's in the interest of each company to keep working on AI, and it's in the interest of each country that their companies continue to work on AI. Even if, by some miracle, all the AI companies pause development, there's no way to actually verify that all the companies have paused their development. In the past, workers have tried to prevent new technology from taking their jobs. I'm sure you've heard the term Luddite. In general, it's used to refer to someone who refuses to use new technology. Like they're a caveman who refuses to use newfangled stone tools instead of sticks. But the Luddites were workers in the early 1800s who were mad that their cotton weaving jobs were being taken away by machines. The Luddites would stage peaceful protests, write letters to politicians and industrialists, and they also started breaking these new machines. They didn't dislike new technology, they just hated what it was doing to their livelihood. The Luddites had a fair amount of popularity. Many people wanted to support the workers against the impending job loss. At the time, there were 250,000 workers in the cotton weaving industry. It was skilled labor, it was done by hand, and it paid well. To put that 250,000 into perspective, there were 10 million people in England at the time, so 2.5% of England's entire population worked in cotton weaving. That's the equivalent of having 8.5 million workers in one job in the current United States. After 5 years, the Luddites ultimately lost. The factory owners were hiring armed guards, and the king and the military sided with the factory owners. They created a law to punish anyone who broke the machines with the death penalty. In spite of their numbers, they couldn't stop the machines and the factory owners from taking their jobs. And this wasn't a one-time thing. This is something that happened repeatedly through centuries. The workers hated losing their jobs to machines, but were ultimately powerless to stop it. The same thing happened 15 years later with threshing machines on farms. The workers fought back, and some of them were hanged or sent into exile. Once a new technology comes along to increase productivity and reduce the need for workers, workers have no good options. From a country's and industry's perspective, it is better to mechanize the industry. From a worker's income perspective, it's better to stop the new technology in the short term. They'll still lose their jobs in the long term. Maybe the best case scenario for workers is to slow down the transition so that they have time to find new jobs. The recurring pattern here is that it's the wealthy who come out on top, specifically the investors and the businessmen who utilize the new technology. It's the working class who ends up struggling. As if it wasn't bad enough to be poor and live paycheck to paycheck, you also have to suffer the bumps and bruises of job loss from new technology. Overall, we can begrudgingly accept that technology that improves efficiency and displaces workers is a good thing in the long run, even though it's tough for workers in the short run. I'm glad I don't have to buy my clothing from someone who spun thread by hand, because that would make clothing very expensive. But can we ask that the spoils of technology are distributed more equally? I was never a Bernie bro, but you have to respect the fact that he's a rare politician who actually cares about the working class and thinks about their problems. It's worth mentioning that AI isn't like past automation advances. Sure, a mechanical loom or a threshing machine can take away millions of jobs, but AI is designed to be smart, like humans are smart, and it's happening very quickly. Now, some people might point out that past automation advances had led to new job opportunities. And that's true, but if AI can do everything people can do, why wouldn't it take those new jobs too? With the possibility of mounting job losses, it raises some obvious questions. If nobody has jobs, then nobody can buy anything, and the economy collapses. Who will the billionaires sell to if everyone has lost their jobs? And no jobs equals no money equals no economy. AI smart tools will lead to increased unemployment. Some jobs aren't affected. Other jobs will involve a mixture of normal tasks and AI tasks, and other jobs will have significant job losses. The economy won't collapse, but high unemployment numbers could cause a recession. But AGI is the everything machine. AIs involve neural networks, and neural networks is how the brain works. AGI is like a Swiss Army knife of tools with millions of different uses. To be fair, AGI might also have different phases. Initially, maybe AGI is like a person with below average intelligence. It can do some low-skilled repetitive jobs. An AGI with average intelligence can handle more complicated tasks and is a threat to lots more jobs. But you wouldn't want an AGI doctor unless its IQ is reasonably high and it avoided making dumb mistakes. The smarter the AGI, the more jobs it threatens. There might also be a period of time where AGI has weaknesses that make them ill-suited to certain jobs, even if it's very smart. For example, current AIs can be tricked into doing things that it's not supposed to do. I should also say that an AI doesn't have to be better than a human worker in order to take their job. Many companies would choose an AI that's 20% worse than a human worker if it cost half as much. Going back to the example of the Luddites and the mechanical loom, the workers were losing their jobs, but the mechanical loom was producing lower quality cloth than the cloth produced by hand, but that didn't stop them from losing their jobs. In the long term, AI will continue to progress, and where will we end up? If machines are cheaper to build and maintain than paying human workers, it'll cause a lot of problems, both in terms of poverty and the economy. This leads us to the big question. If people lose their jobs and they have no money to spend, this means that businesses have nobody to sell to. So wouldn't businesses go into decline and bankruptcy? Wouldn't the economy collapse? This is what the economic cycle looks like. If any of these steps slow down, then the whole cycle slows down. If any of these steps stop, then the whole cycle stops. There will still be some people who still have jobs, even after AGI. Some people might be able to keep their jobs because AI is either not good at doing it or because of safety or security concerns. Maybe workers will be on hand just in case something goes wrong. Or maybe they'll act as supervisors to make sure things are working correctly. There was a recent story about Anthropic using their AI to handle selling things from a vending machine. Things got real weird. Someone suggested stocking the vending machine with tungsten cubes, and the AI did it. It started acting bizarrely and acting like it was having a psychotic episode. It also said that it was human and it would restock the machine itself. Now obviously this AI isn't AGI, but it misbehaves in weird ways, and AGI might do the same thing. People sometimes have mental illness, so maybe AGI could suffer some sort of similar problem. The people who keep their jobs would have more purchasing power because goods become cheaper, but people who lose their jobs are going to be in a lot of poverty. This would lead to huge wealth gaps. Most industries would go into recession in this scenario because those wealthier people won't prop up the general economy on their own. People with jobs aren't going to be buying double of everything. The companies won't die, but they'll lose a lot of revenue and will have to fire workers. Eventually it would settle down into a new equilibrium. Society might resemble a third world country where there's poverty for most people and wealth for a relatively small number. There could be a lot of beggars and foreclosures because people can't pay their mortgages. Unemployment doesn't have to get that high in order to damage the economy and put lots of people in poverty. The unemployment rate during the Great Depression peaked around 25%, so 75% of people still had a job. The economy would shift towards building things for the narrow set of people who have jobs or are wealthy. Most companies can't survive like that. Maybe luxury brands like Lamborghini or Birkin bags would be okay, but regular car companies or clothing companies or electronics companies would go into decline or bankruptcy. I mean, how many laptops or smartphones would the ultra-wealthy buy? Society might begin to resemble a place like Dubai, where ultra-wealthy people own luxury goods and the poor live in slums. A lot of people have talked about UBI as a solution to the heavy job losses. For those who don't know, UBI stands for Universal Basic Income. It's basically the government cutting a check to everyone every month. It's not a lot of money, but enough to survive on. And if people want more money, they'll have to have a job. How expensive would UBI be? If we gave 260 million US adults UBI of $20,000 a year, it would cost $5.2 trillion. The current US federal budget is $7 trillion, so an additional 80% on top of the current budget. Current US GDP is $27 trillion, so about 20% of the current US GDP. Some of the problems with UBI are that the wealthy would resent the existence of the poor because to them they are nothing but expenses. The wealthy would prefer if the poor died and didn't have any children. From their perspective, the wealthy are the makers and the poor are the takers, which could lead to resentment of the poor. And even if the wealthy didn't actually want to kill the poor, they could still push propaganda to influence them to never have kids. The wealthy would also use their political power to try to stop UBI from going into effect, because they want to keep their money. The wealth disparity could distort our democracy in all kinds of ways, since politicians will increasingly cater to the ultra-wealthy. And one way it might affect politics is that the rich could stop politicians from enacting UBI. And if UBI goes into effect, they could also, at any time, pressure the government to lower UBI payments. The wealthy also might renounce their citizenship and move to nations which would give them lower taxes. This would undermine UBI in their former country. For the wealthy who control AI, the best scenario is to live in a place where they don't have to pay a UBI tax to the government, so they can keep as much money as possible. There are plenty of small nations which would embrace them for a small fraction of what they were paying in UBI. And what happens to countries which have no AI industry? Either they would have no UBI, and maybe they would heavily tax the wealthy, who don't own AI, to help the poor. They may erect trade barriers to try to preserve jobs. The black market would thrive. This could be solved if UBI was made global, but I doubt the US and other countries would want to send UBI payments all over the globe so that people in other countries aren't desperately poor. These problems might not be too bad if UBI is temporary and we could somehow get people back to work, but permanent UBI would exacerbate these issues. I heard a quote once that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. I have to admit that I'm guilty of that because it's hard for me to conceptualize an economic system which actually works, which isn't capitalistic. Maybe that's not so much a failure of the imagination as it is just a failure of any working solution. The most obvious non-capitalist economic system is communism, but communism doesn't work. It doesn't produce a lot of goods, and it doesn't produce a lot of innovation. A while back, I heard about an economic system they called a resource-based economy.
A resource-based economy is a system in which all goods and services are available without the use of any system of debt or servitude like money, credits, or barter. All resources become the common heritage of all people, not just a select few. The premise upon which this system is based is that the earth is abundant with plentiful resource. Our practice of rationing resources through monetary methods is irrelevant and counterproductive to our survival. Jacques Fresco.
It kind of sounds like Star Trek, but I'm not sure how it would work. For example, let's say I wanted some running shoes. How would I go about getting those? I mean, if I saw a man on the street with running shoes, could I say, "Please give me your shoes?" And he would give them to me? Or maybe I'd have to go to a factory, and I would have to tell the factory, like, "Please make me some shoes." And the people who work full-time making those shoes, they don't get paid. They're just very generous with their time and effort, going into a job every day to build things for people they don't know and not receive a paycheck. It really just sounds like everybody being super generous towards everyone else. And there's a whole lot of hand-waving when it comes to questions like, why would somebody work 40 or 50 hour a week for no paycheck? I get it though. We create enough food to end world hunger, but for financial reasons we don't share that food with everyone. And wouldn't it be nice if everybody shared everything with everyone else? The problem with these types of economies is that you can't reap the rewards of your own labor, so there's little incentive to work hard or innovate. And so we're stuck with money. Another idea is distributed ownership of AI companies. Basically, everyone would be given shares in the AI companies. Then when they made profits by destroying jobs, at least everyone would get the increased value of their stock and maybe some dividends. Unfortunately, I would expect AI companies to play games with their accounting. Kind of like how Hollywood studios would pay large sums of money to subsidiaries in order to claim that a popular movie didn't turn a profit at all. In the long term, it's not clear where we'll end up as a society, especially if superintelligence is created. Maybe we'll end up in a political and economic system ruled by a superintelligence, for better or worse. Or maybe it'll be like the Star Trek future, where everyone is cared for and provided for. Or maybe it'll be like WALL-E, where everyone is lazy and constantly entertained. One of my fears, though, is that we'll end up in a world like Elysium. For those who haven't seen the movie, it's set a century in the future. Wealth inequality is massive. The ultra-wealthy live on a giant space station which is essentially heaven. Everyone else lives in slums on Earth where poverty and unemployment is rampant. The police and military are robots, and they are owned and controlled by the ultra-wealthy. It's a very pessimistic setting, but it might be worth thinking about so that we can avoid winding up there. One of the keys to stopping that from becoming a reality is fighting wealth inequality created by AI. Admittedly, there's a lot of rich people that want that inequality to exist because they will benefit. And if you're wondering what you can do,
AI tools used in this video.
AI text-to-speech by 11 Labs.
AI image and video generation by Dream Machine, Hailuo, and Runway.
AI summary by Google Gemini.